Tom Jenkins loved his small home at the edge of Pine Valley Estates. What he loved even more was his beautiful orchard in the backyard. For 20 years, Tom had planted and cared for over 30 fruit trees. There were apple trees, pear trees, cherry trees, and even a few peach trees. Each tree had a special meaning to Tom. Tom was now 65 years old. His wife Linda had died 5 years ago. She had helped him plant most of these trees. When Tom looked at his orchard, he didn't just see trees. He saw memories of Linda. The big apple tree near the fence was the first tree they had planted together when they bought the house. The row of cherry trees was planted when their daughter was born. Each tree told a story from their life together. Every morning, Tom would wake up early, make a cup of coffee, and sit on his back porch. He would look at his trees and think about the good times with Linda. The orchard gave him peace. It was his special place. Tom's house was at the edge of Pine Valley Estates. His was one of the original homes built 25 years ago. Over time, the neighborhood had grown. Now fancy new houses were being built on the other side of his property. These new homes were much bigger and more expensive than Tom's simple house. With the new houses came a new, stricter homeowners association, HOA. The HOA made rules about how homes should look, what colors people could paint their houses, and many other things. Tom didn't like all these rules, but his house was grandfathered in, which meant he didn't have to follow most of the new rules. One sunny Tuesday morning in April, Tom was enjoying his coffee on the porch when he heard loud noises. It sounded like big machines. The noise was coming from the edge of his property, near his beloved orchard. Tom put down his coffee cup and walked over to see what was happening. What he saw made his heart sink. 3 men with a backhoe were digging a large trench right along the edge of his property. The trench was about 4 feet deep and 3 feet wide. It ran right next to his line of oldest trees. "Excuse me," Tom called out to the workers. "What are you doing here?" A man in a yellow hard hat looked up. "HOA drainage project," he said. "We're digging a trench to fix water problems in the new section." Tom looked at the trench with worry. It was very close to his trees. He knew that trees had roots that spread out far from the trunk. Cutting these roots could kill his trees. "This trench is too close to my orchard," Tom said. "You're going to damage the roots of my trees." The worker shrugged. "Just following orders from the HOA, sir. You should talk to them if you have a problem." Tom felt anger building inside him. These trees were more than just plants to him. They were his memories, his connection to Linda. He couldn't let them be damaged. "Who's in charge of this project?" Tom asked. "That would be Mr. Peterson, the HOA president," the worker said. "His office is in the community center." Tom looked once more at the trench and his beautiful trees. Some of the roots were already exposed in the dirt wall of the trench. He knew he had to act fast, or he might lose trees that had taken 20 years to grow. Trees that held 20 years of memories. "I'll be back," Tom said to the workers as he turned to go back to his house. He needed to find this Mr. Peterson right away and stop this trench before it destroyed everything he loved. What Tom didn't know was that this was just the beginning of a battle that would change everything in Pine Valley Estates. Tom walked quickly to his house. He changed out of his gardening clothes and put on a clean shirt and pants. He wanted to look proper when he met with Mr. Peterson. Tom knew that first impressions mattered. The community center was a new building at the entrance of Pine Valley Estates. It had big glass windows and fancy stone walls. Tom had never been inside before. He took a deep breath and pushed open the heavy glass door. Inside, a young woman sat at a desk. She looked up and smiled at Tom. "Can I help you?" she asked. "I need to see Mr. Peterson right away," Tom said. "It's about the trench being dug near my property." The woman typed something on her computer. "Mr. Peterson is in a meeting right now. Would you like to make an appointment for tomorrow?" Tom shook his head. "This is urgent. They're digging too close to my trees. The roots are already being damaged." The woman looked unsure. Just then, a door opened and a tall man in an expensive suit walked out. He had gray hair and glasses. Tom guessed this was Mr. Peterson. "Mr. Peterson," Tom called out, "I need to speak with you." The tall man turned and frowned slightly. "Yes. And you are?" "I'm Tom Jenkins. I live at 478 Oakwood Lane. Your workers are digging a trench that's damaging the roots of my orchard trees." Mr. Peterson checked his watch. "I have another meeting in 5 minutes, but come into my office briefly." Tom followed Mr. Peterson into a large office with a big desk and many pictures of fancy houses on the walls. Mr. Peterson sat down but did not offer Tom a seat. "Now, what seems to be the problem?" Mr. Peterson asked. Tom stood tall and spoke clearly. "The drainage trench your workers are digging runs right along my property line. It's cutting into the root systems of my orchard trees. Some of those trees are over 20 years old. They'll die if too many roots are cut." Mr. Peterson nodded slowly. "I understand your concern, Mr. Jenkins, but this drainage project was approved by the HOA board 3 months ago. We sent notices to all homeowners." "I never got any notice," Tom said. "We send emails now, not paper mail. It saves trees." Mr. Peterson smiled at his own joke. "The project is necessary. The new homes on Maple Ridge have been having water problems when it rains. This trench will direct water away from their foundations." "But why along my property line? Why not somewhere else?" Tom asked. Mr. Peterson opened a folder on his desk and showed Tom a map. "This is the lowest point in the area. Water naturally flows this way. Our engineers determined this was the only practical route." Tom felt his anger rising. "Those trees mean everything to me. My late wife and I planted them together." "I'm sorry about your wife, Mr. Jenkins," Mr. Peterson said, but his voice didn't sound sorry at all. "However, the needs of the many homeowners must come before the needs of one. The new homes on Maple Ridge are valued at over $1 million each. We can't have water damage problems." "My trees are valuable too," Tom said. "Not in money, but in memories." Mr. Peterson stood up. "I'm afraid I have another meeting now. The project has been approved and will continue. Good day, Mr. Jenkins." Tom didn't move. "What if the trees die? Who will pay for that?" "The HOA is not responsible for any unintended consequences to plants near the drainage project," Mr. Peterson said coldly. "Now, I really must ask you to leave." Tom walked slowly out of the office. His hands were shaking with anger. As he left the community center, he saw more big houses being built on the hill above his property. He understood now. His little house and orchard were not important to people like Mr. Peterson. The fancy new houses mattered more. Back at home, Tom stood at the edge of his property. The workers had dug even more of the trench while he was gone. Several of his oldest trees already looked stressed, their leaves starting to droop. Tom made a decision. If the HOA wouldn't stop their trench, he would find another way to save his trees. He wouldn't let them destroy Linda's memory without a fight. That night, Tom could not sleep. He kept thinking about his trees and the deep trench. He got out of bed and turned on his computer. Tom was not very good with computers, but his grandson had taught him how to search for information. Tom typed "tree roots damage law" into the search. Tom waited until it was very dark before he went to the trench. He wore black clothes and carried a small flashlight. He did not want anyone to see him. The moon gave just enough light for Tom to see where he was going. The trench looked even bigger at night. Tom climbed down into it carefully. The dirt walls were about 4 feet high. He turned on his flashlight, but pointed it down so the light would not show far. Tom had worked with water drainage for many years. He could see right away that Carlos was right. The trench had big problems. The bottom was not smooth. In some places, it went slightly uphill. Water would not flow properly. "What fools," Tom whispered to himself. "They didn't even check the land properly." Tom's plan was simple but clever. He would not destroy the trench. That would be against the law. Instead, he would make small changes that would redirect the water flow. If done right, When it rained, the water would flow away from his trees and toward the new houses instead. Tom started by digging a small side channel near his property. He made it look natural, like it was part of the original design. This channel would catch water before it could pool around his tree roots. Next, he placed some rocks in strategic spots in the main trench. To anyone looking, the rocks would seem like they had fallen in naturally, but Tom placed them carefully to change the water's path. For 2 hours, Tom worked in the dark. He used all his knowledge from 40 years of construction work. The changes he made were small but would have a big effect when it rained. As he worked, Tom thought about Mr. Peterson and the HOA. They had not cared about his trees or his memories. They only cared about the expensive new houses. Tom felt that what he was doing was fair. He was protecting what was his. Just as Tom was finishing, he heard voices. He quickly turned off his flashlight and crouched down in the trench. 2 security guards were walking along the edge of the new housing development. They were carrying big flashlights and talking loudly. "I don't know why they make us check this area," one guard said. "Nothing ever happens here." "It's because these houses cost so much," the other guard replied. "Some of them are worth $2 million. Tom held his breath as the guards' flashlights swept over the trench. Luckily, they didn't shine the lights down into it. After a few minutes, the guards walked away. Tom waited until he could no longer hear them. Then he climbed out of the trench. His back hurt and his hands were dirty, but he felt satisfied. His changes to the trench were complete. The next day, Tom woke up early. He went to look at the trench in the daylight. From above, his changes were hard to notice. Everything looked normal. The workers came back that day to finish the last section of the trench. They did not notice anything different about the parts Tom had changed. That afternoon, dark clouds began to form in the sky. The weather report said a big storm was coming. It would be the first major rainfall since the trench was dug. Tom sat on his porch and watched the clouds. He felt a mix of worry and hope. Would his plan work? Would the water flow away from his trees as he had planned? Or would something go wrong? The first drops of rain began to fall. Tom put on his raincoat and went to stand near the edge of his property. He wanted to see what would happen when the trench filled with water. The rain got heavier. Water began to run down the hillside and into the trench. Tom watched carefully as the water level rose. At first, everything seemed normal. Then, just as Tom had planned, the water began to flow along his hidden channels. The storm was just beginning, and Tom's plan was working. But even he didn't know just how well it would work, or what would happen next. The rain fell harder and harder. Tom stood under his big umbrella, watching the water fill the trench. His plan was working better than he had expected. The water was flowing exactly where he wanted it to go. The small channel Tom had dug was carrying water away from his trees. Instead, the water was now flowing toward the fancy new houses on Maple Ridge. Tom smiled as he watched. His trees would be safe now. What Tom didn't expect was just how much rain would fall that night. The weather report had said it would be a big storm, but this was turning into the biggest storm in 10 years. The rain came down in sheets. Thunder boomed overhead and lightning flashed across the sky. By evening, the trench was completely full. Water rushed through it like a small river. Tom's secret channels were working perfectly, maybe too perfectly. The water was now flowing straight toward the lowest part of Maple Ridge, where 5 of the most expensive new houses stood. Tom began to worry. He had only wanted to save his trees and teach the HOA a lesson. He hadn't meant to cause serious damage. But it was too late to change anything now. The storm was too strong, and the water was moving too fast. From his back porch, Tom could see lights going on in the houses on Maple Ridge. People were noticing that something was wrong. He heard shouts in the distance. Tom's phone rang. It was his friend Bill. "Tom, are you seeing this storm?" Bill asked. "The water is going crazy over on Maple Ridge. My daughter just called me. She lives near there. She says the new houses are starting to flood." "That's terrible," Tom said. trying to sound surprised. "Is everyone okay?" "So far, yes," Bill said. "But the water is rising fast. The fire department is on the way." After hanging up, Tom felt guilty. He went to his bedroom window, which had a good view of Maple Ridge. What he saw shocked him. There was water everywhere. The perfect green lawns of the new houses were now small lakes. The water was up to the front doors of some houses. Emergency vehicles with flashing lights were parked along the main road. People were carrying things out of their houses, trying to save what they could. The biggest flood seemed to be around a large white house that Tom recognized. It was Mr. Peterson's house. Tom had seen it before in a community newsletter. Now the beautiful garden around Mr. Peterson's house was completely underwater. Tom sat down on his bed, his heart beating fast. This was much worse than he had planned. He had only wanted to redirect some water, not cause a flood. What if someone got hurt? What if the authorities figured out that he had changed the trench? He decided he needed to help. Tom put on his rain boots and coat and walked toward Maple Ridge. When he got there, it was chaos. People were shouting and crying. Firefighters were using pumps to try to remove water from houses. Tom saw Mr. Peterson standing in front of his house, looking shocked. His perfect white pants were muddy up to the knees. He was shouting at a firefighter. "This is unacceptable." Mr. Peterson yelled, "We just put in a drainage trench to prevent this exact problem. Someone must have made a mistake." Tom walked up to a firefighter who wasn't busy. "Can I help?" he asked. "I used to work in construction. I know about water drainage." The firefighter looked relieved. "We could use an extra hand. We're trying to dig a channel to direct the water away from these houses." Tom nodded and took the shovel the firefighter offered him. As he began to dig, Tom felt mixed emotions. He felt bad about the flooding. But at the same time, he knew his trees would live. And maybe now the HOA would understand that you can't just ignore other people's property. What Tom didn't know was that someone had seen him working in the trench 3 nights ago, and that person was now watching him dig. Tom worked hard helping the firefighters. They dug new channels to direct water away from the houses. His hands were sore and his back hurt, but he kept digging. Part of him felt he needed to make up for what he had done. As the night went on, the rain finally began to slow down. By morning, the flooding had stopped getting worse. The firefighters thanked Tom for his help. They said his knowledge of water flow had been very useful. Tom walked home slowly. He was tired and wet, but when he reached his property, he noticed something good. His orchard trees had not lost any more leaves. The water had flowed away from them, just as he had planned. Later that day, Tom took a nap. He was woken up by a knock on his door. When he opened it, he was surprised to see Carlos, the worker from the trench-digging crew. "Can I come in?" Carlos asked. He looked nervous. Tom let him in. They sat at Tom's kitchen table. "I saw you," Carlos said quietly. 3 nights ago. I was walking home after my late shift. I saw you working in the trench." Tom's heart began to beat fast. "What do you want?" he asked. Carlos raised his hands. "I don't want anything, sir. I'm not here to threaten you. I just wanted you to know that I understand why you did it." "You do?" Tom was confused. "Yes." Carlos nodded. "I told you my grandfather had an orchard. When I was a boy, a big company built a dam that changed the water flow. My grandfather's trees all died. It broke his heart." Tom relaxed a little. "So you're not going to tell anyone?" Carlos looked out the window at Tom's orchard. The trees looked better today. The water didn't hurt them. "No," Tom said. "They'll be okay now." "The flooding was very bad," Carlos said. "Mr. Peterson's house had 2 feet of water inside. Many expensive things were ruined." Tom looked down at his hands. "I didn't mean for it to be that bad. I just wanted to save my trees." Carlos stood up. "I came to warn you. There will be an investigation. The HOA has hired engineers to find out why the trench didn't work." Tom felt afraid. Will they be able to tell that I changed it? Maybe, Carlos said, if they look very carefully. But there's something else you should know. The company I work for did not build the trench correctly. They cut corners to save money. That's part of why it flooded so badly. Tom thought about this. So even without my changes, there might have been problems. Yes, Carlos said. Not as bad, maybe, but problems for sure. After Carlos left, Tom sat on his porch thinking. He felt bad about the flooding, but he also felt that the HOA and the construction company had brought many of the problems on themselves. They had not cared about his trees. They had built a bad trench. They had not listened to his warnings. The next day, Tom got an official letter from the HOA. There would be an emergency meeting that evening to discuss the flood damage. All homeowners were required to attend. Tom put on his best clothes for the meeting. He wanted to look respectable. As he walked to the community center, he wondered what would happen. Would someone accuse him of changing the trench? Would he be forced to pay for the flood damage? The community center was packed with angry people. Tom took a seat in the back row. Mr. Peterson stood at the front, his face red with anger. He looked like he had not slept. "This meeting will now come to order," Mr. Peterson said loudly. "We are here to discuss the disaster that happened 2 days ago, and to decide who is responsible." Many people turned to look at Tom. He felt his face grow hot. Did they all know what he had done? Tom prepared himself for the worst. The room was hot and crowded. Everyone was talking at once. Mr. Peterson had to bang his hand on the table several times to make people quiet down. "As you all know," Mr. Peterson said, "a terrible flood hit Maple Ridge 2 days ago. Many homes were damaged. My own home had water up to my knees in the living room." People nodded and made angry sounds. Tom sat very still in his seat. "What you may not know," Mr. Peterson continued, "is that we just spent $150,000 on a drainage trench to prevent exactly this kind of flooding. That trench was supposed to direct water away from our homes." A woman in the front row stood up. Tom recognized her as Mrs. Daniels, who owned one of the flooded houses. "Then why didn't it work?" she asked angrily. "My basement is ruined. All my son's baby pictures were down there, and now they're gone forever." Mr. Peterson looked uncomfortable. "We have hired a team of engineers to investigate what went wrong. They are inspecting the trench as we speak." Just then, the door opened and a man in a suit walked in. He was carrying a folder of papers. "Ah, here is Mr. Thompson from the engineering firm now," Mr. Peterson said. "Perhaps he can tell us what happened." Mr. Thompson walked to the front of the room. He did not look happy. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "I have completed my initial investigation of the drainage trench. I have found several serious problems." The room got very quiet. Tom's heart was beating fast. "First," Mr. Thompson said, "the trench was not built according to our original plans. It is not deep enough in many places. The bottom was not properly graded to ensure water flow, and the reinforcement walls were not installed correctly." People began to murmur angrily. "Furthermore," Mr. Thompson continued, "the construction company did not get all the proper permits for the project. They were supposed to file environmental impact statements because the trench runs near protected trees on Mr. Jenkins' property." Everyone turned to look at Tom. He was surprised to hear his trees were protected. "Protected trees," Mr. Peterson said. "What do you mean?" Mr. Thompson checked his papers. According to county records, the orchard on Mr. Jenkins' property was registered as a heritage garden 15 years ago. His late wife filed the paperwork. This means those trees have special protection under local law. Tom was shocked. Linda had never told him she had registered their orchard. It must have been a surprise she was planning before she got sick. "Are you saying we weren't supposed to dig near his trees at all?" Mr. Peterson asked. "Exactly," Mr. Thompson said. "The trench should have been at least 50 feet away from the heritage garden boundary. By placing it where you did, you violated county regulations." The room erupted in noise. Some people looked angrily at Mr. Peterson. Others looked curiously at Tom. Bill, Tom's lawyer friend, stood up. So the HOA could be held legally responsible for any damage to Mr. Jenkins' trees. Yes, Mr. Thompson said. And there's more. My team found evidence that the trench was altered after it was built. Tom felt his stomach drop. Here it was. He was about to be caught. Someone made changes to the trench design. Mr. Peterson asked. Yes, Mr. Thompson said. But the interesting thing is, those changes actually improved the design in some ways. Without those changes, the flooding would have been even worse. Tom couldn't believe what he was hearing. His changes had helped. However, Mr. Thompson continued, the main cause of the flooding was clearly the poor construction. If the trench had been built properly to begin with, even with the alterations, the flooding would not have happened. Carlos, who was sitting near the door, caught Tom's eye and gave him a small nod. The meeting continued with people shouting and arguing. The HOA would need to sue the construction company. Homeowners wanted compensation for flood damage. Everyone was angry at Mr. Peterson for not overseeing the project better. In all the chaos, no one was paying attention to Tom anymore. He sat quietly, feeling a strange mix of relief and satisfaction. His trees would be safe now. And somehow, Linda had protected them all along. The meeting went on for 3 more hours. People were very angry. Many of them shouted at Mr. Peterson. They wanted him to step down as HOA president. By the end of the night, Mr. Peterson's face was red, and he looked ready to cry. Tom stayed quiet through most of the meeting. He was still thinking about what the engineer had said. Linda had protected their trees without even telling him. It was her final gift to him. And somehow his secret changes to the trench had actually helped the situation. As people were leaving the meeting, something unexpected happened. Mr. Peterson walked over to Tom. Mr. Jenkins, he said in a quiet voice, could I have a word with you? Tom was surprised, but nodded. They stepped outside where it was quieter. I owe you an apology, Mr. Peterson said. When you came to my office about your trees, I dismissed your concerns. I was wrong. Tom just looked at him, not sure what to say. The engineer told me more details after the meeting. Mr. Peterson continued, your trees are very special. Some of them are rare varieties that aren't grown much anymore. That's part of why your wife registered them as a heritage garden. Linda never told me she did that, Tom said. Well, she did a good thing, Mr. Peterson said. And now I need to do the right thing too. The HOA will pay to have an expert check on your trees and treat any that were damaged by our trench. Tom was shocked. This was not what he had expected. Also, Mr. Peterson said, looking uncomfortable, I would like to ask for your help. My help? Tom asked. Yes. The engineer said you have a lot of knowledge about water drainage. You used to work in construction, right? We need someone who understands these things to oversee the fixing of the trench. The board would like to hire you as a consultant. Tom could hardly believe what he was hearing. You want me to help fix the trench? Yes, Mr. Peterson nodded. You would be paid, of course, and we would make sure the new design protects your orchard properly. Tom thought about it. If he was in charge of fixing the trench, he could make sure his trees would be safe, and no one seemed to suspect that he had changed the original trench. I'll think about it, Tom said. The next morning, Tom walked through his orchard. The trees that had started to look sick were already showing signs of recovery. The water was flowing away from them now, just as Tom had planned. As he was checking on his favorite cherry tree, Tom saw Carlos walking toward him. Carlos was carrying a small tree in a pot. Good morning, Mr. Jenkins, Carlos said with a smile. I brought you something. What's this? Tom asked, looking at the small tree. It's a special kind of apple tree from my homeland, Carlos said. My grandfather grew them. I thought maybe you would like to add it to your orchard. Tom was touched. Thank you, Carlos. I would be honored to plant it. Together, they dug a hole and planted the new tree. As they worked, Carlos told Tom about his grandfather's orchard and how he had learned about trees as a boy. Tom shared stories about planting the orchard with Linda. When they finished, Tom invited Carlos to have coffee on his porch. They sat looking out at the orchard and the damaged houses beyond. Workers were already beginning repairs on some of the flooded homes. "Will you take the job?" Carlos asked. "To fix the trench." Tom sipped his coffee. "I think I will. Someone needs to make sure it's done right this time." "They won't find out what you did," Carlos said quietly. "The rain washed away most of the evidence, and I won't tell anyone." Tom looked at the young man. "Thank you, Carlos. Not just for keeping my secret, but for understanding why I did it." Carlos nodded. "Some things are worth fighting for, Mr. Jenkins. Your trees, your memories of your wife. These things matter." Tom felt at peace for the first time in weeks. Sometimes, he thought, even when you do something wrong, things can still turn out right in the end. 6 months had passed since the big flood. Summer had turned to fall, and Tom's orchard was full of ripe fruit. The trees that had almost died were now healthy again. Even the special apple tree that Carlos had given him had grown well. Tom walked through his orchard, picking the best apples for a pie. He had learned to bake since Linda died. His pies weren't as good as hers, but they were getting better. The new trench was finished. Tom had worked hard as the consultant for the project. He had made sure it was built right this time. The trench now curved around his orchard, keeping a safe distance from his trees. It was deeper and stronger than the old one. It had proper walls and a smooth bottom so water would flow correctly. There had been several big rainstorms since the new trench was finished. Each time, the water flowed safely away from both his orchard and the houses on Maple Ridge. No more flooding had happened. Many things had changed in Pine Valley Estates since the flood. Mr. Peterson was no longer the HOA president. He had stepped down after the investigation showed he had not properly checked the work of the construction company. The new president was Mrs. Daniels, whose basement had been flooded. She was much nicer than Mr. Peterson had been. The construction company that built the first trench had been forced to pay for all the flood damage. They also had to pay a fine for not getting the right permits. Tom had heard they almost went out of business because of it. Tom's friend Bill came to visit him that afternoon. They sat on the porch eating apple pie. "Your orchard looks better than ever," Bill said. "And those heritage garden signs the county put up look nice too." Tom nodded. After learning about Linda's registration of their orchard, the county had officially marked it as a protected heritage garden. Now, no one could build anything near it without special permission. "Have you seen the new community center plans?" Bill asked. "Yes," Tom said. "I think they look good." After the flooding, the HOA had decided to build a new, bigger community center. It would have a special room for displaying the history of Pine Valley Estates. Mrs. Daniels had asked Tom if they could include information about his orchard in the display. He had happily agreed. "Oh, I almost forgot," Bill said. "I saw Carlos yesterday. He said to tell you the garden club wants to visit your orchard next month. They're interested in learning about those rare tree varieties." Tom smiled. He had joined the local garden club, along with Carlos. They had become good friends. Carlos often brought his children to help Tom with the orchard. In return, Tom was teaching Carlos everything he knew about trees. As Bill left, Tom saw Mr. Peterson walking down the street. Mr. Peterson had changed since the flood. He was quieter now, less proud. His fancy house had been fixed, but he had lost his position of power in the HOA. To Tom's surprise, Mr. Peterson stopped at his fence. "Good afternoon, Mr. Jenkins," he said politely. "Your apples look very good this year. Would you like some?" Tom asked, surprising himself. "I just picked a basket full." Mr. Peterson looked surprised too. "That's very kind of you. Yes, I would like that." Tom went inside and brought out a small bag of apples. As he handed them to Mr. Peterson, he felt at peace. The anger he had felt 6 months ago was gone. "My wife would have wanted to share them," Tom said. Mr. Peterson nodded. "Thank you. And thank you for helping fix the drainage problem." You could have just let us struggle with it after what we did to your trees." Tom looked out at his orchard. The trees were strong and healthy now. They would continue to grow and bear fruit for many years to come. Linda would have been happy. "Sometimes," Tom said, "you have to protect what matters to you. But once it's safe, you can move on and help others too." As Mr. Peterson walked away with his bag of apples, Tom sat back down on his porch. The late afternoon sun made the fruit in his orchard glow like gold. He had protected Linda's trees, just as she had protected them by registering them as a heritage garden. And in the end, he had helped make the whole neighborhood better. Tom smiled. It had been quite a journey, from anger to revenge to peace. And through it all, his orchard had not just survived, it had thrived.